Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
Yo, what up with it? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Hoodie. And man, just like I stated in the previous video, it's seeming like every other week there's some new news or information out about UFOs. So just a couple days ago, Congress actually held a public hearing discussing these UFOs, this technology, secret organizations within the government that's been receiving a ton of funding over decades, and it's pretty much been unchecked. There's a lot of people in the government who know about it, and there's a lot of people who don't, and it seems like the people who don't really want to get to the bottom of that topic more than anything. We also have 3 very credible witnesses to this whole thing that they brought forth. They had to put their hand on the Bible and swear under oath that everything they're saying is the truth. A lot of the questions that we really wanted answers to couldn't be answered because this was a public hearing. So most of the really good questions kind of got followed up with, you know, I can't discuss that here in this setting, but after we can get into the private conversation, classified information discussion thing that they call the skiff. I'm actually really surprised at how serious it seems like Congress is taking this topic with the questions that they've been asking the witnesses throughout it, and it's seeming like some of them are definitely convinced that something is going on, right? About alien bodies being recovered, alien aircraft being recovered. David Grush claims that he knows the exact location where these things are being stored. So for this video, I'm gonna actually just let some of the most important clips from this hearing just roll, and I'm gonna let you come up with your own conclusion to everything, man. I'm gonna save you all of the headache from having to watch the whole entire 2.5 hour hearing. And I'm gonna pick the most interesting stuff out of the hearing out for you. So without further ado, let's jump into some of these clips, man.
Good morning and welcome to the most exciting subcommittee in Congress this week, the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border and Foreign Affairs, for discussion of unidentified anomalous phenomenon. I'd like to thank the brave military pilots and personnel, such as the witnesses on the panel today, for sharing their stories on how they have engaged UAPs, which has brought attention to this matter. Curiosity and speculation from all walks of life have generated interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they may pose. I will say that when I was younger in school, I read a book, a 1966 book called Flying Saucers, Serious Business, and for a while, when I was a little bit younger, I thought it was the most important issue out there. The lack of a transparency regarding UAPs, which was one of the themes of that book, in any event, it's led to interest in studying what UAPs are and what threats they pose. The lack of transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them, as is evidenced by the large number of people we have here. I also want to point out in 1966, President Gerald Ford claimed to have seen a UFO, and in 1969 in Georgia, Jimmy Carter claimed to have seen a UFO. So this has led Congress to establish entities to examine UAPs. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2022 established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to conduct or to coordinate efforts across the Department of Defense and other federal agencies to detect, identify, and investigate UAPs. However, AARO's budget remains classified, prohibiting meaningful oversight from Congress. In addition to AARO's efforts, NASA is leading an independent study on UAPs that will identify how UAP data is gathered from both civilian and government entities that can be analyzed to shed light on the topic. However, despite these offices being established, there lies a pressing demand for government transparency and accountability that cannot be overlooked, and that's been a problem that's been around for 50 years.
I want to remind everybody this is a nonpartisan issue. This has nothing to do with party politics. I think the cover-up goes a lot deeper than that.
Without objection.
Also, would like to enter in, I understand now that this is unclassified and it's public record, but as we all know, that's sometimes difficult for the public to get a hold of. A report, Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, Advanced Space Propulsion Based on Vacuum space-time metric engineering, some light reading for some of our members.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Knapp wrote, since 1969, the position of our military has been that UFOs pose no threat to national security and are not worthy of further study. I'd say that's the biggest understatement of the decade. The UFO is emerging as a major topic of global importance. I can state that as a fact. Out there, I met a fellow who came in here all the way from Denmark to be here for this meeting. So this is huge. This is worldwide. I think we suspect what's going on, but I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who have supported our efforts to make this hearing happen. Some have even confided to me that they've had UFO sightings of their own. Those members, of course, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I'll keep it that way. Finally, I'd like to thank these three brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this.
The circumstances surrounding UAPs has captivated the attention of the American people for decades, ingrained in even the minds of our nation's leaders from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, Marco Rubio to Chuck Schumer, John Radcliffe to National Security Council officials. Yet from Roswell, New Mexico to the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, the sightings of UAPs have rarely been explained by the people who have firsthand accounts of these situations. This is largely due to the lack of transparency by our own government and the failure of our elected leaders to make good on their promises to release explanations and footage and mountains of overclassified documents that continue to be hidden from the American people. This isn't just how I feel. In fact, the American people largely believe that the government has actively covered up the truth about UAPs. One poll in particular found that 68% of Americans believe that the government is hiding information about UAPs and not being honest about what we know about them. And from my personal experience, I believe the same thing. Another poll found that nearly half Americans believe that the federal government is doing a very bad or somewhat bad job of dealing with reports of UFO sightings. As Representative Burchett just referenced on the FAA bill that just went through, you can tell that that's exactly happening. Considering the thousands of testimonies and videos taken on people's phones and eyewitnesses' accounts made by credible witnesses such as doctors, pilots, scientists, and active duty service members, it is unacceptable to continue to gaslight Americans into thinking that this is not happening or that the potential of intelligent life forms exists other than humans.
Our witnesses have a unique opportunity to share their perspective, insights, and their experiences with the American people. And I encourage all of my colleagues to engage with these difficult questions with an open mind and to follow the facts on behalf of our country.
And it's not something that is just going on in this administration. It's something that's spanned many administrations. For decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time that they got some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Those are not the words of a UFO Twitter account, though that is a direct quote from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. In an interview with Fox News, recent former Director of National Intelligence John Radcliffe confirmed the U.S. government is aware a lot more sightings of UAPs, and that they have not made that information public. I quote, "There are a lot more sightings that have not been made public," Radcliffe said to Fox News.
The witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I am a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that has been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends.
Note that aircraft that are being witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today and the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country, and that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Gresh, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. As they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
My first question is, you've identified these as taking place on the East Coast. Is it just on the East Coast where these encounters have been reported?
No. Since the events initially occurred, I've learned that the objects have been detected essentially where all operations, Navy operations are being conducted across the world.
Mr. Grush, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment. Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off.
In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off.
I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
does that mean that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you've spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just, and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up, but please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town, and so I think that's because I'm from Missouri. You've got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush, and so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity. And I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. when we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico, and when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace, not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb, again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection, as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and you can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it, and the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
Mr. Fravor, you've described your episode in detail now, and you call it the most credible UFO sighting in history. But I wonder, was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before that happened?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but I wasn't a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel and MUFON and all that.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced then?
Yes. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
Like I stated before, some of these claims are very interesting. But what makes this whole situation really catch my attention are the witnesses like David Grush and Commander Fravor, who actually could be harming their career, and the way their family, friends, and co-workers look at them by coming out with this information and deciding to stand on this hill. You know what I'm saying? When they say they've seen something like this, it just makes it feel just a little bit more credible. And especially everything that David Grush has been coming forth saying over the past few weeks. And even in this hearing that, it definitely raises an eyebrow. It makes you wonder what him and his wife actually saw, like what happened to them that he can't speak on right now, you know what I mean? I really do hope that he was able to pass on some valuable information to these congressmen after this hearing, because, as you heard, he could be prosecuted if he was to come out and speak on something that he shouldn't. And I'm sure that if there is a group behind the scenes that he is trying to shine the light on, I'm sure they can't wait for him to say something that he shouldn't say just so they can prosecute him and get him out the way, you know what I'm saying? He's already stated that he's received threats, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that we hear about UFOs and in this whole alien topic and debacle that's going on right now. I want it to be real so bad, but being that I know that, I have to remain skeptical and kind of unbiased with things like this, because it's so hard to tell what's a psyop, what's the truth, you know what I mean, what's actually meant to distract you and what's not, man. But hope you enjoyed the video. Till we get more news on this, I'm sure this won't be the last time we hear about this over the next upcoming months. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like, subscribe button for your boy, and until next time, man, peace.